So in freshman year of college, I had a roommate who was super big into like GMO and or non-GMO and organic foods and stuff. And up until that point, I never really thought about it or really considered, the difference between the two and all that. But so I asked him, I was like, so what's the difference? Like, what draws you to, the organic foods and all that? And the only thing I really got out of him was that it's just better. He never kind of clarified why. He just said it's better for you and it's better for the environment. So that got me to research this stuff to see, does claims have any kind of backing to them, or he's just kind of saying things he's heard. And when I looked at the data, what I found surprised me. And it was actually that genetically modified foods were actually had a less environmental toll. They were also nutritionally just as good, sometimes better than organic foods, and they had socioeconomic benefits, especially to the developing world. And for the environmental benefits, the kind of the proliferation of use of these things has decreased the use of pesticides. And a study conducted between 1996 and 2005 showed that 40% reduction in pesticide use, and this was done by Graham Brooks and Peter Barfoot of PG Economics. And to verify that number to see if there's any other use of that number, I found another article by the Department of Agriculture, Economy, and Rural Development by the George August University in Germany. And they also said that pesticide use had reduced by 37%, which is pretty consistent with the 40% number. Another thing was that they reduced the amount of pathogens on the crops, both pathogens that are harmful to humans as well as the environment. For example, E. coli was found in 9.7 samples of organic foods, as well as 4.3% of USDA certified organic, which has a lot more stringent rules, but only 1.6% of traditional or conventional GM foods. And another thing is that GM foods increase access to foods due to their more efficient production. So one reason is that they're less susceptible to crop failures. One thing would be pathogen resistance. In Hawaii in the 90s, there was a big problem with a virus called the ring spot virus, which ravaged papaya crops. And these crops, they were getting wiped out. But GM production kind of stopped that, and none of the traditional methods worked. They tried replanting, they tried isolating things, but the crop kept dying. And until the shell of the virus was injected into the papaya to keep the virus from infecting it, there was no real headway into keeping it. And a similar thing in Uganda happened with their banana crop, which is a staple fruit there, and that was also threatened by disease and also saved by genetically modified bananas to resist that disease. And we in California should know about droughts and how they can really affect agriculture, as well as just the politics of it, whether farms should be able to use as much water or how the allocation should be. And there's recent discoveries of both genes and proteins that could help increase drought-resistant properties in plants, especially in staples such as rice, wheat, and corn, which are the majority of the world relies on those as a staple. For example, the Arabidopsis hardy and DRO1 genes in rice can increase drought-resistant properties due to faster photosynthesis, as well as increased root length so that more moisture can be gotten. Proteins CSPA and CSPB, if inserted into corn, can decrease water loss. And wheat can be made to have longer roots, which can sap more moisture out of soil. Another thing is that higher yields help meet food demands in the developing world. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, by 2050, agricultural product needs to be increased by 70% to feed the growing populations. And while developed countries have strong enough agricultural industries to feed everybody, what really is affected is the developing countries. And in the Philippines, there's a 30% increased yield in corn after the introduction of BT corn, which has a small portion of a bacterial toxin in it to prevent bacterial infection. There was a 6 to 9% higher rice yields in China, as well as a 31% increased yield in cotton in India. Now, cotton's not a food crop, but it's very essential to India's economy. They're the second biggest producer and exporter of cotton. So increased cotton yield has a huge impact on the economy of that country. And a lower need for pesticide use increases the profit that people get from farming, so it encourages, there's more incentive for people to farm, and that encourages more food production in those countries. They also have, the GMOs have advantageous consumption value. There's a lot of, information saying that organic food is a lot more nutritionally dense than conventionally grown GMO crops. But a study published by the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition concluded that there is no significant difference in nutritional quality between conventional and organic crops. They did notice that conventional crops had a higher level of nitrogen, while organics had a higher phosphorus level. And they can also be modified to fit nutritional needs. For example, vitamin A deficiency is a really big problem in Southeast Asia and Africa, which can lead to, especially in younger children and infants, visual impairment, blindness, and even death from somewhat common diseases. And modified foods such as golden rice, if you've heard of it, which is rice with a higher level of beta-carotene in it, which gives us its color, that could be a solution for malnutrition problems in those countries. So all these things, the ecological, the socioeconomic, as well as the just increased yield are, I think, all beneficial things, and that's why this is a good technology.
One minute and 33 seconds. You spoke 7 minutes. All right, I like the opening where you kind of give us a reason why you're talking about this, the conversation that you had with your roommate earlier last year, I guess it was, and that I think kind of develops a little bit of the controversy and why you need to have this discussion. What I'm missing, though, is a declarative statement of what your proposition is. I don't really hear that. And I know what your inference is. I know what it's leading to. I know where I'm going. But if I had to say, so what is it at the end of this that I'm supposed to believe, it needs to be a lot clearer. Now, you did have kind of, which is kind of odd, despite the fact that you didn't have a very clear proposition, you did have a pretty good setup of what the supporting structure was going to be. The problem is that I don't know that everybody knew that it was the supporting structure. I figured it out, and so I was taking notes on it. And then when you get to it in the body of the speech, there aren't any numerical signposts. You don't remind us about those particular points. We just, it's going to be great if somebody's listening carefully. They'll be able to follow everything you're saying. People are lazy. And like I said to somebody else earlier, sometimes they need to be a little bit spoon-fed information, and I think that you need to kind of force the audience to see your organizational structure a little bit more. It wasn't that it was disorganized, it's just that it's not as clear as it needs to be for most audiences, and so I think you need to work on that a little bit. There's a lot of information in the speech. It's not always cited very clearly. Sometimes I got a good citation. So there's a UN source that you give at one point. There's some other information that you present that provides a little bit of statistical data. But one of the comments that I was putting down consistently in the section on evidence is, well, where's the source citation? There's no source here. No source is cited on this particular point. You've got a whole bunch of statistical information at the end. It may have come from that study that you cited. It may have come from some other source. I couldn't tell, and I think you need to be much more consistent on it. I don't think you're making information up, but we have no way of validating it, evaluating how accurate it is, And by the way, the person who's doing the refutation, if they just had your speech to go off of, they would have a nearly impossible time trying to figure out how to evaluate that information because you didn't provide a source. Now, I know that you've got a bibliography here. They get the bibliography, but none of the rest of us, well, none of the rest of the audience is going to see any of that stuff, and it needs to be a little bit more apparent in the speech. I thought you did a pretty good job presenting it. Like I said, and almost all of your ideas and concepts are clearly explained. So I thought that that was a very solid part of the speech, that you kind of explained why it is that we're going to have reduced use of pesticides and why that's a good thing, why it is that it's going to address issues of availability of food. I thought that was a good piece of information that you've got there, and you explained it pretty well. And then on the end point, when you're talking about the nutritional thing, I think the same kind of thing. You've got an example that you're using here. You kind of explained the concept, how this is going to work. I thought that those explanations were pretty clear. Once again, the citation of the information needs to be stronger. All right, thank you.